So the scriptures this weekend point out to us envy, selfish ambition, and welcoming the children. So first, envy. Probably many of you remember from catechism that envy is one of the 7 deadly sins, also sometimes called the capital sins. And just by way of review, the 7 deadly sins are pride, envy, anger, greed, lust, gluttony, sloth. And that's not a menu of options. So the challenge with the 7 deadly sins, or capital sins, is that they are called capital because they often lead to other sins. They are entry points to other ways of sinning. And so we'll start with envy. What is envy? So a good definition of envy is an unreasonable or an unjustified anger at someone else's success. Now, of course, I know none of us have ever been afflicted by that because we are only interested in each other's good. But just in case that's ever crossed your path, the challenge with envy is that we look at what someone else has or what someone else has received. So take, for example, a promotion, right? What's the first thing we do? Well, we say, yeah, they got the promotion, but do you know how they got the promotion? So we start to sully their reputation. We gossip about them. And really, a lot of times we think gossip is harmless, but gossip is just a mild version of murder because we're all so kind and polite to each other that we'd never, of course, take another person's life. So instead, we just take their reputation, which is equally destructive. And so envy leads to so many other sins. And the first reading today really gives us a look inside the mind of someone who, as we would say, is eat up with envy. So the first reading goes through the mind of the sinful person who is envious of the righteous person. We would call that righteous person sometimes in a negative way the Boy Scout or the goody two-shoes. And so the person in the first reading is looking at this good person and thinking of evil things to do to them. And it's even a cynical mindset. If this person's really good, God will take care of them, so I don't have to take care of them. In fact, I can even do harm to them, and it'll work out fine because they're God's chosen son. And so what it does is it shows us what that sinful mind looks like. And that's why in the second reading, James speaks to both envy and its associated pattern on the other side, which we would call selfish ambition. Now, to be ambitious in itself is not wrong. If someone wants to work harder to earn more money for their family, that's not sinful. What becomes sinful is when our ambition becomes strictly focused on me, myself, and I. Now, are any of you NASCAR fans? Any fans of NASCAR out there? Not too many? Okay. Well, you probably have heard of Dale Earnhardt. He was a famous NASCAR driver, and he was quite successful. He was also famous for a phrase. He said, "Show me somebody who came in second, and I'll show you the first loser." That's selfish ambition. Because when we are competing so much that we're willing to push others aside, that's when we start to sin. And both of those are kind of companion pieces because our envy causes us to want to lash out and do harm to the one that we are envious of, but our selfish ambition puts us in a posture of trying to get to the first of the pack. Now, again, I know this doesn't afflict any of you, but imagine you're driving down the interstate and there's this pack of cars in front of you. And of course, there's that typical person in the left lane going below the speed limit, and you just relax and enjoy the ride, right? Or do you start passing cars so that you can get to the front of the pack? And then, of course, you speed up and you get to another pack of cars, and you have to repeat the process all over again. That's the danger side of ambition, of trying to always get in front, of always putting ourselves first because we're willing to put others second. That's selfish ambition. And so St. James in the second reading speaks to both of those, and he talks about it in battle terms, that both of those things create a war inside of us. And the unfortunate thing about that war is that it spills out. The war going on inside of us, our dissatisfaction with our own life, leads us to envy what someone else has and then to want to take it for ourselves. Or the ambition that's so selfish inside that we would be willing to bump another person out of the way so that we can be first. Both of those are spiritually disastrous. And so in the gospel, we see that even in the apostles. And so we can be assured that this is not anything new. This sin has been with us since the beginning of Christianity. But it is disastrous to us. And we see it in the gospel reading because Jesus is sharing his very life with his apostles. He's trying to warn them and prepare them that his life is going on a different path than what they might have imagined. Now, in the Gospel of Mark, where we meet the reading today, they've just been on Mount Tabor. They've seen Jesus transfigured. They've seen his glory. They've seen him heal someone who was unable to speak and possessed by a demon. They've seen all this majesty, and that's what they're focused on. And so when Jesus tells them that he's going to be arrested and persecuted and killed and die, they can't understand it. And so as a result, they start competing with each other to try and decide who's first. And when Jesus asks them about it, everybody's silent because no one wants to admit what they're talking about. And that's why Jesus takes a child and places that child in front of them. Now, my brother Mike, before he got married and had his own children, used to hold babies as if they were a bomb about ready to explode. He wasn't quite sure what to do with them, but he was sure that they were messy and noisy. But when Jesus places a child in front of his apostles today, he doesn't do it because children are cute and sweet. He did it because children were powerless and nameless and faceless. They were the ones who had no status in society. They were the ones who had no power and no ability to help themselves. And so to welcome the children is not just literally to welcome children. We do welcome children well here, and I'm always thrilled when we have children at Mass because a community that doesn't have the sound of babies crying is a community that is dying. And so we need to be able to literally welcome children into our community. But besides welcoming children literally, it's also figurative. It's to welcome those who are powerless, those who are nameless, those who are unable to take care of themselves. That's where we should be looking. And that's why the example of Jesus' life speaks to us. Because unless we're willing to be like one who serves the others, we'll never be first. There's no way that we can be first by putting ourselves first. The only way we can be first is by putting ourselves last. And that's why if you haven't had a chance to look at our rose window lately, I encourage you, before you leave church today, just come up towards the front and look at it, because our rose window is always an image of an ordered life spiritually. It puts Jesus at the center, and at the center of our rose window is Jesus showing us the image of his sacred heart, surrounded by the crown of thorns, on fire with the divine love of God. And then everything else around it has its relationship to the center. It's ordered appropriately because it is centered on Christ. And around the image of Jesus in our rose window are all the symbols of the crucifixion and passion and death of Jesus. And so if you took any one of those symbols, if you just took the nails that were nailed into the hands and feet of Jesus by themselves without Christ in the center, it would make no sense at all. It would simply be a painful experience. If you take the crown of thorns by itself, not centered on Jesus, it would just be torture. But when you place them in an orderly fashion around Jesus Christ in the center, it makes sense. It takes on meaning and significance. And the same thing happens in our lives. When we enter into life with Christ at the center, all the other experiences of our life are ordered rightly. And because they're ordered rightly, they make sense. They have meaning and purpose. And so the scriptures this weekend challenge us. They challenge us to be honest about the things that we are envious of. They challenge us to look at where our selfish ambition has possibly hurt others around us. They challenge us to look at the passion, death, and resurrection of Christ and to see in that the pattern of our lives.